To most people, the Queen's Gambit looks like a mistake, a free pawn left unguarded right in the center of the board. But to a grandmaster, it's a weapon. Most people think chess is just a game of math. They're wrong. Chess is a game of social engineering, and the Queen's Gambit exploits a fundamental flaw in the human brain: greed. In this video, we're going to break down exactly how that happens. We're not just going to look at the moves, we're going to visualize the invisible pressure that makes this one of the deadliest chess openings ever created. D4, D5, C4. 3 moves. That's all it takes to set up the Queen's Gambit. And this is exactly where the social engineering aspect begins. But before we get there, why does the center of the board matter so much? In chess, the center is the high ground. Control it and your pieces hit stronger squares faster and dominate more of the board with less effort. A knight in the center can reach almost any square in 2 jumps. Deny your opponent that and you cripple their mobility. Now watch what happens. If black takes a pawn, they fall for the first trick. They're technically richer by 1 pawn, but in exchange, they have surrendered the high ground. White strikes back with e4 and now white has a board locked with 2 pawns in the center. And almost immediately, white recovers a pawn with the bishop as well. The free pawn was a lie. The Queen's Gambit forces black into a choice: take the pawn and surrender control over the center of the board, or defend their own pawn. That single decision splits the opening into 2 paths. The Queen's Gambit accepted and the Queen's Gambit declined. And no matter which path black chooses, white gets exactly what they wanted. But before we get into the counters, there's a bigger question we need to answer. Why is the Queen's Gambit so popular? Here's the thing, of the top 10 players in the world as of April 2021, 8 of them regularly play the Queen's Gambit as their opening as white. In fact, during the legendary 1927 World Championship match, the Queen's Gambit was used in 32 out of their 34 games. The Queen's Gambit is one of the most deeply analyzed and structurally sound openings ever created. You could spend years studying its variations and still barely scratch the surface. Here's the thing about its name. The Queen's Gambit isn't really a gambit at all. In chess, a true gambit involves sacrificing material, a pawn, sometimes more in exchange for central control or to gain an advantage for attack. Openings like the Danish Gambit, Evans Gambit, Vienna Gambit, or King's Gambit all follow this philosophy. But the Queen's Gambit is different. White almost always wins the pawn back. In other words, there's no real sacrifice, and you'll see exactly how that works in this next counter. So what if your opponent is smart? If black declines and tries to defend the pawn with e6 or c6, that's when the boa constrictor effect kicks in. White brings out the knights, putting pressure on black's pawns. Black defends, then white develops the bishop to attack the knight, and black protects it with their bishop, and it keeps going. White attacks constantly while black is frozen, reacting to every move. After white plays c4, one of the most popular defenses is the Slav defense. The difference between the Queen's Gambit decline and the Slav is that black wants to develop the light squared bishop first, before playing e6 to avoid the bad bishop problem. The only problem with that is that the Slav has so much theory to it, it's almost a different opening on its own. Now, beginners often try to outsmart the system. They take the pawn and then try to keep it. They build a wall of pawns to protect their winnings, but this is where white often wins the game in under 15 moves. In this scenario, white can play e3, unblocking the bishop and threatening the pawn. If black defends with b5, white can respond with a4. If black captures, white recaptures with the bishop, and now the second pawn is under threat from the rook or queen. If black tries to hold the pawn with c6, white can trade pawns and then slide the queen to f3, directly threatening black's rook. Black can defend with the bishop, a knight, even the queen, but there's no clean escape. Any move risks losing a piece. Through these variations, a single stubborn pawn becomes a trap, move by move, until black's position is broken, and that's why grandmasters hate playing against this. You slowly run out of good moves. But here's the thing I haven't told you yet. The principles behind the Queen's Gambit, control, pressure, and making your opponent act against their own interests, aren't just for chess. One man used these exact ideas to pull off some of the greatest cons in history, including selling the Eiffel Tower not once, but twice. Click this video to see the full story of Victor Lustig and how he engineered the ultimate con, because whether it's chess or life, the game is always won before the first move is made.